Welcome to Have an IPA with a CPA. We're here to share ideas to help you and your business make more money and keep more of the money you make. Hi, I'm Robyn Pye.
And I'm Paul Mueller. Robyn and I are CPAs and owners of Mueller Pye & Associates with offices in Northern Colorado and Katy, Texas. Today's topic is about preventing workplace fraud.
Such an important topic.
It is a very important topic and one that can really wreck a business.
Absolutely.
But let's first talk about beer.
Yeah, so what do we have here?
So we're at Grimm Brothers Brew House in Loveland, Colorado. This is the original craft brewery in Loveland, Colorado. And today we're having the Blood Orange Griffin. It's a hazy orange appearance and it's a fruit, I don't know if I can say this, Hefeweizen ale.
All right.
Let's give it a try. Cheers.
Cheers. That's really good. I like the orange beers.
Yeah, it's
They're
good.
tasty.
And
They're tasty.
This is a way to refresh maybe after a little bit of a hike. Or
Okay.
something. Yeah,
All right.
very
So
good. Okay.
workplace fraud, fraud prevention. Why is it so important?
Well, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners publishes a biannual report every year, and the last report they issued was in 2018. And what they have found, a couple of items in their global study, is 95% of employees come to work wanting to do the right thing and work on an ethical, diligent basis. It's that tiny minority that can wreak havoc at a business. Workplace fraud can create economic, reputational, and psychological damage to a business because oftentimes it's a trusted employee who's then dishonoring that trust with the business owner, and it just creates all kinds of ripple effects, not only with owners, but with fellow employees and with outside vendors as well. What the study finds is that 42% of frauds, almost half of all frauds, happen to small businesses. And it makes sense that small businesses don't have a whole lot of people to divide up duties, but it is a real threat to small businesses. Not only that, but the average loss for a small business is $200,000 when a fraud happens, and the fraud typically happens for as long as 16 months before it's ever detected. So it's like a cancer within the business that can create all kinds of other types of problems. What makes these things so often hard to detect is that only 4% of the fraud perpetrators have a first-time offense. So this isn't something you're going to find in a background check when you're hiring somebody because they may have never had any kind of problem with going to the dark side. So it's really hard.
So I don't know about you, but when I'm discussing this issue with clients, there's some pushback there. So tell me your experience, the biggest challenge in working with small business owners.
You know, when you bring the topic up, there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction of denial. You know, it's like it can't happen to us. Everybody's heard about Enron and a lot of the big companies that were in a lot of those accounting frauds, but they think with us it can't happen. And why? Well, oftentimes the business owner hired all of his employees, and the business owner doesn't want to admit that maybe he made a bad hire with somebody. I've also heard, owners say, well, the bookkeeper is like a member of my family. She babysits my kids on weekends, and sometimes that's the person that pulls the rug out under. There's some folks that just don't want to think about it, just don't even want to consider the whole issue. And then I've had some pushback from people like saying, well, isn't that why I hired you? As if you and I as CPAs have some kind of sixth sense that we can sniff out that fraud, even though we're not even there.
Right.
We're not in the office. So it's an interesting conversation.
So how do types of fraud, how do people commit fraud?
The most common type of fraud is check tampering. And in this day and age, for companies that are still using checks, there's a lot of information on that check that can be washed. A lot of that ink can be washed, and somebody who knows what they're doing, they can re-input that information. There's ways to erase the payee's name on a check and change it to somebody else. So checks are dangerous. Billing fraud, where somebody might be creating fictitious vendors and then sending payments to that fictitious vendor when that money's actually going in the wrong place. For businesses that are heavily cash intensive, like restaurants, bars, those types of places, just simple theft is where C. Dummy payrolls, where fake employees are set up and then payments are actually being redirected someplace else. And simple things like just padding expense reports are ways to do that.
Sure. So is there any good news in all of this?
Frauds are eventually found. They're eventually detected. It's just how long does it take to detect it? And the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners did identify two very valuable techniques for detecting frauds. And first and foremost, a tip hotline.
Because employees who might
They can
have a suspicion, may not want to come forward.
They may not want to come
owner.
forward. They'd like to remain anonymous, but they don't like what they see going on. And so a tip hotline allows them to see something and say something, yet protect their identity.
So what percentage of fraud is found that way? Do they have an estimate on that?
40% of frauds are detected through a tip hotline.
So it works.
It works. The other thing that works is some kind of an internal review, maybe some special procedure review of a particular financial transaction or process, and that was effective in 28% of the cases.
So what about companies that hire outside auditors to come in and audit their books?
Despite the perception that you and I somehow have a special sense to detect frauds, it was shown that only 4% of frauds were detected because of the CPA external audit.
And we're not doing audits for our clients.
We're not doing audits, but
so even when they hire
for us to do the tax return,
audit,
we're even more remote from that particular
right.
process.
That's right. Yeah. And some by accident, right? Sometimes
Yes.
it's
We just trip over
discovered
it.
by accident. Yeah. Okay, so any red flag behaviors that small business owners could look out for?
So in the last couple of reports that the certified fraud examiners issued, they really focused on the behavioral aspect of frauds. Prior to that, they were focusing on schemes, processes, who was doing what, where were the frauds coming from. Lately, they've been focusing more on behaviors that indicate where a fraud might occur. Now, it's important for our viewers to understand that just because somebody exhibits a behavior doesn't automatically make them a fraudster. Sure. But if you've got people that are living beyond their means, if you've got a bookkeeper that works for a business and they're driving a Jaguar in the parking lot, that's a little unusual. Maybe somebody's going through some financial difficulties, an illness, or a spouse that got laid off and they're under some pressure. Folks that are maybe going through a divorce could create some kind of pressure. Sure. What we also see is that employee who never takes a day off, who never takes a vacation, they're proud that they've never taken a sick day. As an employer, you might look at that and say, boy, that's a real loyal employee. But they might be there to hide
when
and
you
cover
and I
up.
think about that, I think they don't want somebody seeing what they're doing. They
Right.
don't want somebody taking over their duties for that short period of time.
Right.
So
they don't want to give up control.
Flag.
They don't want to share what they're doing with other
Yeah.
people. They're keeping it very close to the vest.
Yeah.
That could be an indication. But again, because somebody has one of those behaviors or they're going through an outside challenge, doesn't automatically make them a fraudster, but it means that you should be more observant.
So we've talked about fraud is difficult to detect. What about prevention?
The good news there is there's the certified fraud examiners identify 5 really key prevention steps, and the really good news is they're almost all free. One is that tip hotline.
Sure.
It seems to be the most effective technique for keeping frauds or ending them and detecting them. So some kind of a fraud or a tip hotline where an employee that sees something going on, that they can at least take action.
See something, say something.
See something, say something.
All right.
Going paperless. Again, like I said earlier, that check contains all the information a perpetrator needs to pull off a fraud. We'll stop using checks. Use electronic payments or use an outside bill payment service where they produce the checks and send them to the vendor. Get that out of your office. Also, on the flip side, accept electronic payments for income. So if somebody's paying the business by credit card, debit card, or a bank transfer, it's awfully hard for somebody to step in the middle of that process and redirect that money someplace else.
Okay, so let me ask you this, code of conduct. So I went to school at Texas A&M and we have a code of conduct.
You have an honor code, don't you?
Aggies do not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. So is there any sort of...
That was one of the most amazing things that came out of the most recent study that the certified fraud examiners did, that companies that post and publish a code of conduct, one that could be as simple as the one you just said, exhibits tone from the top. And the fact that it's published and posted and people see it, those companies have a 50% less chance of being hit with a fraud.
Wow.
So it's free, it's easy, and it works.
Yeah.
Another one, again, is just business owners need to be aware of those red flag behaviors. Just watch what's going on and see if if your gut tells you that something's going on, you might want to look a little further.
Yeah.
And then the one we always talk about is the separation of duties.
Yeah.
When you have a financial transaction process, if one person controls that process from beginning to end, then they have too much control. And that needs to be chopped up in some form or fashion. Good news is we have checklists, we have tools, we have resources that even for a 2-person office, there are ways to separate duties. Not perfect, but there are ways to separate duties to reduce that risk of fraud.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great, Paul. Thank you for this information. We hope that you found it useful as well. Be sure to send us an email with questions, comments, and suggestions for future topics. And check out our Have an IPA with a CPA YouTube channel for additional topics and ideas. Until next time, Prost!
Prost!